Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ankur Pathania, and I shall be your host for this masterclass. I'd like to welcome you all to SkillUp Online, and thank you very much for joining us. So, before I hand over to our Microsoft certified trainer for today, I need to explain that unfortunately, Parvesh has had an emergency to deal with and cannot join with us. However, we are delighted that Danish Ahmed Siddiqui had stepped forward as our highly experienced Azure trainer instead. I shall introduce Danish in a minute, but first, I'd like to give you a little introduction to SkillUp Online and explain what you have to look forward to over the next 1 hour. SkillUp Online is a smart learning platform that goes beyond just certifications. Our aim is to enable learners to develop deep subject matter expertise, soft skills, and practical experience business needs. Through a human centered approach, we blend the best tools and curriculums online learning offers with mentor based support. And in doing this, we have a proven track record in helping learners finish their training equipped with job ready skills that can use straight away. So, how do we do this? We seek to harness industry expertise and academic excellence through strategic collaborations and partnerships. Examples of those close relationships we have forged include Microsoft, IBM, and Pacific Lutheran University in the US. Through these collaborations, we offer deep learning in fast emerging technologies such as cloud, artificial intelligence, and data science. And of course, we enable learners to build critical competencies in cybersecurity, Dynamic 365, Power Platform, the modern workplace, and much more. So, with that said, what have we got in store for you today? In a minute, I'm going to hand over to Danish, our highly experienced trainer, who will guide you on how to create virtual machine on Azure. Danish is a Microsoft certified trainer and Azure architect. He has more than 8 years of experience in analyzing information system needs, evaluating end user requirements, designing and implementing IT infrastructure solutions around server management and network management on different technologies, including Cisco and Microsoft Azure Cloud. He has trained over 500 batches on Azure and has been conducting regular workshops on Windows Server, PowerShell, and Azure Cloud. Thus, he brings an invaluable depth of understanding of the real world challenges you face as IT professional. For you today, Danish has planned an interesting and informative session with a demo on how to create a configure a virtual machine in Azure. During his session, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat box. I'll pick your questions for him to answer towards the end of the session. With this said, now I'll hand over to Danish. Over to you, Danish.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our workshop for Microsoft Azure Virtual Machine, and I welcome you all. So I hope you all are doing well. So as you have seen the introduction already, and I thank everyone here to joining me today. So let me put some more words about me, and if you have any question, you can ask then. So it's been more than 10 years now working in IT industry and as an IT professional. And I started as a network administrator and worked on many different roles and many different skill sets. Basically, I'm from the infrastructure security and networking background. And over the period of time, I have developed a skill into several other platforms like Azure, Microsoft Azure as well. That's a emerging technology, and we know that it's now the technology of the day as well. So I hope you all will learn something new from me, and it will be helpful in your career and in your future endeavors as well. Cool. So let's get started. Welcome back, and once again, let's start the session now. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let me know if you guys are able to see my screen.
Yes, Danish, you can see your screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, so in today's module, we're gonna cover how we're gonna create virtual machines and how the actual IT administrator in day-to-day in their day-to-day activities, whenever the demand is there for creating the virtual machine, how do they do it and how they plan for it. Okay, because every single resource you deploy in cloud, you need a planning for it. Okay, so let's have a look. So when it comes to virtual machine, we already know what exactly a virtual machine is. For those who are a bit new to this particular concept, let me tell you. So virtual machine is similar to the computer, which is right now in front of your eyes. As of now, you are using and you are connecting with it. Maybe some of you might be connecting with mobile phones. Some of you might be connecting with your computer or PCs. So it's a similar concept. A virtual machine is a virtual machine located somewhere in a different data centers, and you access it over the public network, okay, over the internet, and you use it. And why we use it? We use it for hosting our applications and services. That's the you can say that the uh, use case of virtual machines as of now, bringing application to the closer to the users or consumers. Okay. So let's understand when we deploy a virtual machine, what are the key things we need to take care of uh, before creating it. Okay. So let's start with the network. Okay. The first thing. So virtual machine is deployed in a virtual network. Okay. So what is a virtual network? Let's understand this first. So I'm gonna open a whiteboard for you guys so that you will have some sort of uh, basic concept clear. So virtual network is a logical boundary which you create in any of Azure's data center. And that logical boundary allows us to deploy virtual machines inside in a secure manner, okay, in a private manner. So let's say this particular rectangle you see here, this box actually represents a virtual network. And within that, you deploy your virtual machines into different logical segments, or you can say subnets. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to plan is how we start with the virtual network itself. Okay. Let's have a look here. So when you go and start creating virtual machine, you have to select a virtual network and you have to give a name for it. For both, if you are creating a VNet first, you have to give a name for that. For instance, I have a virtual network and I will say, okay, my VNet, something like this. And within the VNet, you deploy your virtual machine and you have to give a name for that one as well. Typically, the name is the basic requirement for creating a VM to identify the resource. So you should always follow the standard naming convention. For instance, you are going to use this virtual machine for a web application. So you can say, okay, this is a web server, and it is going to be used for different environment. Let's say prod, we have development environments, we have production environments. So we can say, okay, this web server is going to be a part of a prod, and it is going to be in a particular location. So we can say, okay, it is in East US, something like this, or Central India, or anywhere else. So you give a name, okay, a meaningful name so that you can identify the resource itself. So this is our virtual machine, and we have given the name. So the first thing you start is selecting a proper name, a meaningful name, so that you can identify the resource itself. Then you choose a location. Location is very important. When we say location, location actually represents a physical location on the globe. So Microsoft offers you a public cloud service across the globe where you can choose different types of services. One of the services known as virtual machine. So it's important to choose a right location. Locations are also known as region. Okay. And every region has a different hardware and service capabilities. Not all regions are exactly same. It's like a supermarket. Okay. You have multiple supermarket across the globe, and every supermarket has different sort of products. Okay. So you go and get the product the way you want. Now, location is important. Why? There are two different reasons. The first is if you have a very specific kind of hardware requirement, you can go to a specific location and get it. The second thing is you have to make sure that your virtual machine is located near to your users. For instance, you are sitting in, let's say, there is a web application hosted on this virtual machine, and there is a client here who is trying to access the virtual machine or the web application on it. So if both are in the same region, let's say this virtual machine is deployed inside, let's say, central India. And if the user is also in central India is a region for Azure where Azure has a data center. Okay. So the users will get much better experience while accessing this website. Okay. It will be faster. It will be low latency. But if a virtual machine is hosted in a different region, let's say it is hosted inside East US, and the user is sitting in Central India, there will be uh, a high latency and the user performance will be degraded a bit. Okay, so it's important to choose the right location you want. Location has one more uh, consideration. When you choose the location, you have to make sure that you also understand the compliance and security requirement. For instance, if you are working in India, maybe the government of India has several regulatory compliance requirements. For instance, certain data or certain type of data you cannot store outside of India. So you have to go through the region's compliance requirement as well. For instance, you might have heard about a very popular compliance uh, standard known as HIPAA, okay, and which actually protects the information in a specific geographic boundary. So location are important with respect to security and compliance as well. So what the first thing you choose? The first thing you choose is network. The second thing you choose is a name for your VM. The third thing is you choose is location. Okay, one more thing I want to mention here is the location of your virtual machine and the location of your virtual network should be same. Both are regional service. So if you have a VNet in East US, then only you can deploy a virtual machine in the East US or in this particular VNet. You cannot deploy a virtual machine in a different region where you do not have a network. So make sure the virtual network region and the virtual machine region matches with each other. Then you need to also consider the pricing. Excuse me. For instance, what will be the size of the virtual machine you want? Okay, size. When we say size actually defines the amount of compute power you want, how powerful your machine will be. It's similar to like when we go and purchase different kind of hardware with different CPU and memory and storage. It's the same kind of concept. Okay, so virtual machine comes into different sizes. Microsoft has given us a preset. Okay, different size available. You can choose from those presets according to your requirement. So how you gonna choose the size? If you want to see the different size of virtual machines, you can go and check the list of virtual machines as well, which are available in Azure. There are two ways to do that. Let me show you that. For instance, you can go to Azure documentation, and there you can search for Azure virtual machine size. Okay, a simple Google search will give you the list of virtual machine and its size. And here you can see we have a virtual machine category called general purpose, and we have different size of virtual machines available in it. If you click on it, you will be able to see the list of the virtual machines. Let's say we have A V2 series virtual machine. We have B series virtual machines, and it gives us different sort of capabilities for us. There is one more way to do it and check the size. So you can directly go to portal. And you can choose while creating a virtual machine, what size of virtual machine you want. So let's have a look there as well. And I'm sharing this link with you guys so that you can have a reference. And please post your question, guys, if you have any queries in the chat. I will be happy to answer all of them. So for instance, I'm in the portal right now, and I'm going to create a virtual machine. So I can select a virtual machine from here. As you can see, I do not have any existing virtual machine. I can hit on create virtual machine. Remember, always plan for virtual network before creating the virtual machine. But Azure make it easy for you. Even if you haven't planned already, you can plan your VNet while creating the virtual machine as well. So here I'm selecting my subscription, which is common. And then you select a resource group, which you want. If you do not have already, you can create a new one. Let's say VM RG, that will be fine. And then you have to give the virtual machine name. So for instance, I'm going to give it, say, web server dash broad dash. Let's say it is going to be deployed in East US. And the server number is 01, something like this. And select the region. Region is basically the location. So Azure has so many 40 plus regions available. You can choose from here. And 40 plus data centers available across multiple regions. So you can choose from here whichever the location you want. And then you select the size here. There are a couple of other things also. I will come to that one later on, but you can see the size here. And right now the size which is by default selected is standard DS1 and V2, which gives me 1 vCPU, 1 virtual core, and 3.5 gig of memory at a cost of 3,839 rupees per month. But if you want to see all the size, you can click on it and you can see the list of the virtual machines here. So we have all the different series of virtual machines with different size. You can see the number of CPUs, RAM, disk, and the IOPS. All the list can be seen from here as well. So choose the best suited size for you, whichever suits to you. And then you can go ahead creating your virtual machine. There are a couple of other things which is important while choosing a virtual machine is the operating system image, the OS. And we already know that there are two most popular operating systems we have is the Windows and Linux. So you can choose any uh, you know, operating system from there, either the Windows version or the Linux versions as well. Okay. Guys, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Danish, we can.
That's great. Okay, so the next thing here is we gonna see. Okay. See the operating system. So when it comes to operating system, we have Linux with different distribution, and we have Windows. Okay, we have any either of them available to us. While creating it, you can choose not only the size of your virtual machine, but also the image. Okay, so there are different images, operating system image you can have, and you can choose either of them. I'm good with the Windows Server. If you want to choose a different version, you can also choose that one as well. I'm coming to your question, Umesh, for the encryption part. Just give me a moment, okay? So these are the basic requirements. Then you use your username and password. You enter a username and password to access it. And then you repeat your password. And then you are good to create a virtual machine. Rest of the things will be created automatically for you. For example, the disk, the networking part, which if you haven't planned already, you can plan from here or select from here. When you select the operating system, after that, I have entered the username and password. Then I went to the disk. Okay. So by default, it creates a disk for you automatically. And answering the question of Umesh, that what about encryption? Remember, guys, whatever you create in Azure, and if it is related to storing the data, it's always encrypted at rest, whether you are creating a virtual machine or storage. Okay. And when it comes to OS disk, yes, it's also totally up to you to have your data disk as well, and that will be also encrypted. And it uses BitLocker for Windows and dmcrypt for Linux, okay, for disk encryption. Then we go to the networking. And under networking, you select your existing virtual network if you already have. If you don't have, it will create a new for you. And you can also plan for your subnet and IP addresses. There are a couple of other dependencies we have, for example, the IP address and inbound ports and network interface card, which will be created automatically along with the virtual machine as well. So these are the bare minimum requirements. What are the bare minimum requirements? You need to select a network, a name, location, size, and the operating system. That's the bare minimum. Rest of the things will be created automatically. What next we have? Let's have a look on these slides. Now, when it comes to cost, okay, when you are saying that cost depends upon the size, okay. And when we say size, there are two things you need to understand. There are compute cost, that is based on the number of cores you have chosen, and then there is a cost for the disk you are using, so the storage cost. Additionally, if you are using different operating system, let's say a Windows or Linux, so if it is a Windows, then there will be a cost for license as well. Okay, so these are the three costs which are included when you are creating a virtual machine. So make sure you understand these three different types of cost options which are available to you. If you want to analyze a cost before creating it, Azure has make it easy for us. For instance, it gives us Azure price calculator. Okay, so we can have an Azure price calculator here. And there you can select the service you want to calculate for pricing. So let's say I have selected a virtual machine and it's added here. And there you can select different configuration of it. For example, I want to choose an operating system for Windows. Then I can choose, okay, I want a Windows operating system license only. Then I can choose the size of my virtual machine, the number of virtual machine, and the how long I want to run. And if VM in like the license cost included, then this will be the price you will be paying for the compute and the license. Then there is a cost for disk if you are using at least one disk here. If you bring your own license, then the cost will be less. You can see here. So you are nearly saving $67 for the license as well. So price calculator is a very good way to analyze the costs. Okay, great. Let's talk about the virtual machine storage a bit more. Okay. Each virtual machine has 2 or more disks. Okay. So by default, when you create a virtual machine, you will get at least the OS disk, okay, the operating system disk. But apart from operating system disk, there is one more disk will be created, and that is known as the temporary disk. Okay, a temporary disk. And this temporary disk actually help us to uh, increase the performance of the machine itself. Okay, so it's act as a cache, or you can say a swap in Linux. But this is ephemeral. When you restart the machine, all the data will be lost because it's only for temporary purpose. Don't store your application data or important data on it. It's only there for temporary purpose. So operating system disk is there by default. You will get it while you are creating it. If you want more data to store or your application data to be stored, you attach a data disk to it, okay, which is optional. But in most of the production scenario, you might need it to increase your application performance, because if you put everything on the OS disk, the performance will be a bit slow. Now, the size of the temporary disk depends upon the size of the virtual machine. Okay, you can have a look on this one as well. For instance, if you go back to the portal and if you go back to the basic configuration under size, and when you click on it, so every size of virtual machine gives you a temporary storage of different size. Here you can see it varies based on the size of the machine itself. Furthermore, the disks are divided into 2 types: managed disk and unmanaged disk. Let's understand this one. It's a very important and interesting topic. So let's understand what exactly the managed disk is all about. So when you create a VM, along with the virtual machine, a disk will be created, okay? And this disk is a VHD, virtual disk, okay? Remember, it's a VHD. VHD is, you can consider it as a file, okay? And this file need to be stored somewhere. To store the disk, Microsoft by default gives you a managed storage account, okay? That is known as Azure Storage Account. So Azure will create a disk for you automatically, store it inside a storage account, and manage all the operations for it. So you don't need to worry about anything about the managing the disk or performance or scale. Everything will be managed by Azure. That's why it is called managed disk. Microsoft always recommends you to use managed disk because it gives you much better availability and performance. But there are certain scenarios where you don't want Microsoft to manage your disk. You want full control on the disk itself. So in that case, what you will do, you will create your own storage account. And there you will deploy your own disk and you will manage it. You will manage the permission, you will manage the availability, you will manage the security, everything you will manage. So it will be known as unmanaged disk. By default, when you create a virtual machine, Azure always creates a managed disk. But you have an ability to choose the disk type while creating it. For instance, if you go to the disk section while creating a virtual machine, you can see here we have an advanced option here and it says use managed disk. By default, it is unchecked. If you check it out, what it will do, it will help you to select your own disk. Why it is not highlighted? It depends upon uh, the virtual machine size you have selected. So these features are based on that. Like some virtual machine size doesn't support uh, the unmanaged disk. Okay, so let's suppose I am going to choose a different one. Just a second. Let me create once again. Okay, gallery packages. Like I have selected an image which is coming from the gallery here. You see, if I bring my own image, then I can choose the unmanaged disk. So all of them are right now the gallery packaged images. So this will not allow me to use the managed disk at all. Okay, but if you bring your own operating system image, you are good to use your unmanaged disk as well. So that's the part of the creating a virtual machine. I will come to the backup and replication later on. Let's talk about connecting a virtual machine, how you connect a virtual machine. Let's say you deploy a VM within a network. So remember, when you talk about Azure Virtual Network, Azure Virtual Network is a private network, okay? It's a private network. When we say the private network, this means the traffic remain always within the boundary of your virtual network and no external traffic is allowed come in. Okay, the traffic is not allowed by default. It's not there. So the question is, if we have a VM, we need to make sure that we access and manage it. We need to install the applications on it. We have to go and do that one. So how we connect and how we can do the RDP, remote desktop, or how we can, if it is a Linux machine, how we can do the SSH to it. That's the question. So Azure provides you several ways to do it. One of the most secure and popular way is to use Azure Bastion host. Azure provides you Azure Bastion service, which allow you or allow any user or administrator basically to access the virtual machine hosted within the Azure virtual network in a very secure manner. You create a Bastion host, and then you log into the portal and you try to connect the virtual machine, and it will give you a secure private connection to the Azure virtual machine from the user browser itself. Okay, so let's have a look. So let me create the virtual machine first. Excuse me. Meanwhile, the virtual machine creation is in progress. I will cover the next topic. So Bastion host is a service. Okay, it's a fully managed platform as a service. It's act as a, you can say, a terminal server. Okay, to take an RDP access to the virtual machine. So for instance, let's say you are an administrator and you want to install applications and software within the virtual machine. So how you will access it? So Bastion host act as a terminal server. Using that Bastion host, you will be able to access your secure virtual machine. Okay, make sense? Now answering the question how to create backup and replication of the VM on Azure. No, it's need to be created. It's not auto created. This needs to be created. When it comes to backup, guys, Azure virtual machine has built-in backup capabilities. You can go to the Azure virtual machine. Under the backup, you will be able to configure the backup vault. There is a service called Azure Recovery Services Vault. You can configure your backup and the machines will be backed it up inside the backup vault. Okay, and whenever the machine goes down or something goes wrong to it, you can restore from that backup as well. I hope you got the idea, Sanjeev. So when it comes to Bastion subnet, Bastion service, yes, you need to create it. It's not by default there. When you create a Bastion service, you need to have a subnet first, okay? In the same network, a subnet is required. A dedicated subnet for Bastion. And the name of the subnet will be Azure Bastion subnet. And there this PaaS service will be created automatically for you. And then using this Bastion service, you will be able to access it. Remember, Bastion uses a public IP address. Okay, provide you a public access from a public network in a secure manner. And remember, it is only designed for having an RDP and SSH, not for any other purpose. Now let's come to the next topic, that is compare a vertical or horizontal scaling part. So let's suppose you have a virtual machine, okay, and you have deployed a web server on it. And this web server has a capability to handle 1000 requests per minute. Okay, 1000 requests per minute. 1000 users can access it, or 1000 requests can be made to it. And it will be easily be able to handle it. But what happens if the request becomes 10,000 or 2000 or 5,000? Will this server be able to handle it? No, definitely not. So in that case, what you do? So you increase the capacity of the server in order to handle more load, more requests. So in this particular topic, we're going to understand what are the different types of scaling options we have. When you increase the capacity, called scaling, okay, scale. So we have vertical scale and we have horizontal scale. So let's understand what exactly this means. What is the vertical scaling? Scale up or scale down is the process of increasing or decreasing the power to a single instance of a workload, usually manually. This means if you have a single virtual machine, and right now your virtual machine has 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM, and if you want to scale it up, so you can increase the capacity to 4 to 8 cores and 8 GB RAM to 16 gig of RAM. So it's called vertical scale. The same machine will have now more power. It's called vertical scaling. Okay, it's called scale up. If you reduce the size, it will be known as scale down. Generally, it is done manually. Okay. But in a production environment where you need high availability, you need to maintain high availability for your application, vertical scaling is not a very good solution all the time. So that's why we use horizontal scaling. What is a horizontal scaling? Think about the situation. We have again a VM with 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM, handling 1000 requests per minute. Now we have more load. So what we can do, instead of increasing the size of the same VM, we will create multiple VMs, identical VMs. Means a copy of the same VM, and distribute the load on each one of them. So it's called horizontal scaling. Got the idea? So horizontal scaling is much better as compared to vertical scaling because it is moreover a production kind of scenario or service. Azure Virtual Machine supports both vertical and horizontal. And this horizontal scaling is mostly done in an automated way, in an automated fashion. And Azure provides us a service called Virtual Machine Scale Set. VM scale sets. These VM scale sets allow us to automatically scale out and scale in the virtual machine based on the load. So for example, if the load grows, it will increase the number of VMs. If the load goes down, it will decrease or delete the VMs which are not being used. Answering the question to Umesh, Bastion was shown as a part of the same VNet. Yes, it should be the part of the same VNet where your virtual machines are hosted. Every resource in a virtual network can have a private or public IP address both. In the same way, the Bastion subnet also will have, or the Bastion service will also have a public IP address. When you attach a public IP address to a service, it becomes public service. Okay, it is become open for public traffic. Now let's understand this scale set. Okay, implementing a scale set, how we can scale up and down the services. So let's see it in a practical way. Instead of going through the whiteboard, let's see in the portal. Here you can see my virtual machine is created automatically, okay, already. Whatever the selection we have done, so it's everything is there. When you click on Connect and when you click on Bastion, you can create your Bastion service here. So you need to select a resource group, network, and IP, and it will automatically create a subnet for you, and the Bastion service will be deployed for you, and then you will be able to connect it over the browser for RDP and SSH. So that's the Bastion service for you. So you can deploy Bastion directly. It will take 5 to 10 minutes to deploy, and then you will be able to access it. Meanwhile, we can go and search for scale set. Let's see if we want to do a scaling, okay, how we can do that, the horizontal scaling. So for horizontal scaling, we have virtual machine scale set. We can click on create virtual machine scale set. The process is pretty much same like creating a virtual machine. The additional part will be the scaling feature. Select the resource group, give a VM virtual machine scale set name the same way, web server, and I will say scale set East US -01, something like this. I can give a name. Select the region, availability zone. There are a couple of advanced features like orchestration. Orchestration means multiple VMs will be created based on the load. So if you want to go for a uniform orchestration or flexible orchestration, both are the options you can choose from here. And security standard, basically how the Microsoft actually protects the basic security feature. It is common for virtual machine and scale set and all. Then select your operating system image. Okay, the same way you select for the VM and the size and the username and password. The disk part in the same way you configure just like a VM. And under networking, you will have an advanced thing that is called load balancer. Okay, here. Just because you have multiple instances, multiple virtual machines now, and based on your workload, more and more machines will be added, you need a mechanism to distribute the load on these machines. So your user's request will be distributed using the load balancer. So the scale set has an option available to choose a load balancer while creating a scale set. So here you choose a scale set load balancer if you want. You can choose either application gateway, it's a layer 7 load balancer, or you can choose a Azure load balancer, it's a layer 4 load balancer, and it will automatically create a load balancer for you. The next part is scaling. Here you can define the manual scale or automatic scaling option. In manual scale, you define the number of machines you want to keep running at any point in time. And it can vary between one machine up to 1000 virtual machines. Okay. But in custom auto scale, it will detect the load on the machines, and accordingly, it will add or remove the virtual machines. Okay. 1000 virtual machine maximum you can go up to, but you have to define the limits. Okay. Define it here. How many maximum? So I'm not selecting the um, manual. I'm selecting the custom one. In custom, I will define the minimum in number of instances and the maximum number of instances I want to keep running. Then I define the rule based on what criteria the instances will be added. So there is a scale out rule we have to configure. Okay, so a scale set monitor the machine CPU performance, and if it remains for 10 minutes 75% CPU utilization, then it will increase the count by 1. Okay, so once you create a scale out rule, you have to also create a scale in rule. A scale in rule means removing the machines, deleting the machines if there is no load. So if the CPU utilization is uh, uh, below or equals to 25, it will start deleting the virtual machines as well. So these are the scale set rules which you have to configure additionally while creating the virtual machine scale set, so that it can automatically add or remove instances from your scale set. Any questions so far? So that's the implementation of scale set, guys. Okay. So scale set deploy a set of identical VMs. Remember, all the virtual machines will be exact replicas, same machines. No pre-provisioning of VMs are required, means you don't need to worry about creating VMs and all. It will automatically create it for you. As the demand goes up, VMs are added. As the demand goes down, VM will be removed. And the process can be manual or automated or a combination of both as well. So you can decide manually to increase or automatically to increase or both. It's totally up to you. Here is the scale formula you can have. Let's say you can define minimum 2 virtual machines to be added, keep running all the time, and you can define, okay, maximum it can scale up to 5. If there is a load on these 2 virtual machines, then it will create one more, and then one more up to 5, because you have defined is maximum 5. If the load goes down, it will start deleting the virtual machines which it has created, and it will minimum make sure it will have minimum count matches to 2. So that's the logic behind it. So you define rules to automatically adjust the capacity. A scale out means increase the number of VMs. A scale in means reduce the number of VMs in the scale set. And schedule events to increase or decrease at a fixed time. So what event we have scheduled? We have scheduled CPU as an event, CPU utilization. But if you want to choose a different metrics, you can do that. For example, I want to scale based on a network. I want to scale based on the disk utilization. It's totally up to you. So that's the idea behind the auto scale, guys, and the virtual machine creation and implementation. Now we have reached to the end of this particular topic in our webinar. I'm open for your questions if you have any. This particular slide shows you what are the topics which will be covered inside the 104 and what are the required starting point for your Azure admin journey. For example, you need to learn about identity, governance and compliance, where you will be talking about the RBAC and Azure Active Directory. For administration, you will be learning about the Azure PowerShell, Azure Portal, Azure Resource Manager templates, and Azure automation. You have a couple of other modules you can see here right now on your screen, like virtual network, intersite connectivity. You will learn here the VPN, VNet peering, and so on. So you can take a screenshot of it, or you can just contact the coordinator. They will give you more detail about it. And this is the career path for the Azure admin. So whoever wants to become an Azure administrator, they can go with the AG 104 4-day training session, where all these topics will be covered, and which will help you to achieve the certification and also will help you to achieve the practical hands-on knowledge of working on Azure platform. There are a couple of other career paths are also available. For example, if you want to become solution architect like me, so you can also go with the AZ104 and then 305. That is the solution architect certification, and you will be awarded a solution architect badge for it. So that's all from my side, guys. I'm open for your questions. If you have any, feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Danish, for this insightful session. So let's move ahead now. I'll share my screen. Right, so now as promised, it's time to talk about the courseware that comes with attending this masterclass. Would recommend keeping a check on the email you shared with us to attend today's masterclass. You will receive an email from skillpipe.com mentioning your license key. Please follow the instructions provided in the email to access the courseware. Also, do watch your inbox for email from us on the details to download the certificate of participation and recording link of the masterclass in a week's time. So it's time for yet another bit of good news. We are currently offering a special 50% discount on the AZ104 Microsoft Azure Administration course. This course is a great way to prepare for taking the Microsoft certification exam, as you will learn to manage identities and governance, implement and manage storage, deploy and manage Azure compute resources, configure and manage virtual networking, monitor and backup Azure resources. This course will begin on 11th April. This limited time period offer expires on 4th of April. So get in touch with us soon as to reserve your spot at this amazing price. Before we go ahead, I would request to please fill the feedback form. How you felt about today's session? Please check the chat window for the feedback form link. I hope everyone is filling the feedback form so that we can improve and deliver what exactly you're looking for in future. Also, Danish, there is a query in chat from Hemant on AZ305. Could you please elaborate about AZ305?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, just a second. What was the query? Sorry. About AZ305. AZ305 is basically a course designed for solution architect. Okay, so if you want to go ahead in your career and you want to get certified for Azure Solution Architect to explore more career opportunities and much better profiles, so you can go with the AZ305. Okay, this is designed for those people who have a very good experience and exposure in the in designing the and implementing the infrastructure and PaaS solutions in Azure. So that is all about that, the AZ305. That is actually the immediate path next after the AZ104.
And also, Hemant, if you want to know more about the course on AZ304, please do write us on contact@scaleup.online. We will be happy to assist you further. So, well, thanks, Danish, for providing those valuable answers. It's been an interesting session. I'd like to thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. I hope you found this masterclass useful. We've certainly enjoyed having an opportunity to update you on the process of creating a virtual machine in Azure. It's a much needed skill in the world of cloud computing. Don't forget to check in your email accounts for details on how to download a certificate of participation, recording link, and can't be missed the discount offer. If you'd like to find out more about the Microsoft Azure courses or any other query on trainings, you can connect us at contact@skillup.online. Thank you everyone for today and joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice
Thank you,
time.
Danish.
Bye-bye.